gives like a detailed background of their testimony and their experience. And, oftentimes there is a diagnosis, depending on what the severity of the abuse has been. So oftentimes there might be depression, a lot of PTSD because of the violence that's been enacted towards some of the clients that I've evaluated. And those are very challenging cases. And on the provider side, I think.
It's frustrating.
There have been times I just need an emotional break.
Yeah. Yeah, we get a sense of hopelessness sometimes too. Because, and I want to ask you this too, because sometimes we have stigmas within stigmas, and one of those is like within the broader mental health profession, PTSD is one of those that hangs out there. It's like, well, I don't want that diagnosis because that means more. It shouldn't mean more. It's just diagnosis is diagnosis is diagnosis. But the greater community sees that as something like quote unquote worse. And then they worry about where that's going to land them, if it's going to prevent them from being able to access other services or get a driver's license or a job or pass a background check. And my question to you is, when you're working with the immigrant population, probably undocumented because they're trying to get citizenship, is there a fear that the very real diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder or something else that sounds bigger or heavier is going to affect them negatively in the process itself that they're trying to achieve by coming to you?
I haven't encountered that.
That's good.
I think, which is a good thing. I think it's just more of like, can my experience be recognized? And support, why I'm in the situation I'm in.
So you're seeing that people just want to be seen and heard.
Sometimes, yeah. A lot of times, some people want to be heard. Like, so for example, if you're in a situation where like you've been you're a partner of someone who has abused you and used your undocumented status against you, there's fear. So there's like a power and control element with that, and you're afraid of, being deported or being arrested. And the elements that come with that. So when you know that the attorney that you're working with is able to come to bat for you, then the person who's evaluating you is able to help you, document your experience so that you can have a chance at the life that you intended to live, prior to being in this type of relationship, I think is what is like the light at the end of the tunnel, is that possibility that they have to really to find a life and a sense of normalcy that they're looking for.
How real is that fear that the significant other is going to rat them out and they're going to get shipped back?
It's definitely real.
Really?
It's definitely real. Even outside, even domestic violence relationships outside of immigration, it is still that element of power control where that person is holding something over you in order to control your decision making.
Call your boss, tell them something bad about you so you lose your job, become more dependent upon me as the abuser. Yeah, that makes sense. I get that. I just didn't know if that was legitimate, because my understanding is a little clouded on what constitutes deportation these days. I thought for a while it was just crime commission, but I guess just simply being here and not being papered is enough to go back. So that's pretty serious then.
Yeah.
Something for everybody else in our profession to be mindful of. I think if we're dealing with somebody who's, like I can't even imagine the struggle that it takes to maintain a semblance of a life in this country when you're not here legally, but then you have to come over that hurdle to even get the help that you need. And in the back of your mind is like, if I go get the help, it could all blow up in my face anyway. That's crazy.
Well, here's what happens in some of these situations. At the beginning of the relationship or prior to, the marriage, the documented spouse will say, I'll help you get documentation. And they're like, okay, great. So they go into a relationship believing that this will happen, and then it doesn't.
And before they know it, they're like indentured servants.
And before you know it, their spouse or their partner is saying, well, I'm not going to help you get documented because of this or that. Or if I don't do what I tell you to do, I'm gonna call immigration on you.
So what's the protection against that? How do we how do we help that from happening? Because it seems like, abused person gets healthy, but the abuser is still knowledgeable that person's still in the country undocumented. It seems like they could just like pull that lever at any time. Is there something we can put in place like, oh, hey, they're in the process. It's okay, or does that even matter?
Okay. Well, I'm not a law expert, but what I can say is that some immigrants do have legal protections, and which is why this waiver has been instated in the first place. Is supposed to be a legal protection for those who are abusing the person's undocumented status.
I see. Okay. Do you work much with domestic violence broadly, or is it mostly in this context?
Just in this context. But I have a background in with working with some members of the population, but I do think that's a different specialty. So
Yeah, it is, and that's going back to the jack of all trades thing from the beginning. It's like it's nice to be knowledgeable in depth and breadth, but when you can't, we as practitioners have to be honest with ourselves about where we're treading. That if we don't have the competency to do it, it could not only cause harm to the client, but it could cost us our license if we do something poorly.
yeah, absolutely.
How'd you come about the infertility evaluations and what's that all about?
So third party reproduction evaluation are a little bit different. That's not something I'm offering at this time because that takes a completely different training. So it is part of the perinatal mental health field, but it requires different specialized training and supervision in order to really be able to do it properly.
Okay. Well, while you're not doing it, tell us what it is.
A lot of times there are couples who like, so as part of the infertility process, some couples may have donors, either egg or sperm donors when they're going through the fertility treatment process. And so this process is really important to really knowing like the strength of the couple's relationship, where they are psychologically, will they be able to mentally be able to go through the process, and understanding all the different parts of what the infertility treatment process might look like depending on what their health concerns are.
So it's really couples counseling is what it is, but with a sort of a twist and a focus.
In a way, because as part of that process, the people who do these evaluations have to see what measure the strength of the relationship and see how the infertility has impacted each person individually and as a couple.
Is that what you're evaluating, or what the evaluator would be looking for? Is the strength of the relationship so it can endure in case like the treatment doesn't work, or it does work and then you get twins, or that's funny. We laugh, but it's not funny. So you're evaluating for strength and appropriateness of fit for the medical intervention. Is that kind of what I'm getting? Seems like we should be doing that before we even embark on pregnancy in the first place.
I don't know, because I kind of agree and I kind of disagree, because sometimes with a parent, if you're ready, you want to become a parent. I think so. I would say equipping couples or individuals with the supports that for them to get through entering parenthood as successfully as possible will probably be the best approach, because it can sound limiting to other people who may not understand.
Right.
If that makes sense. But
Yeah,
just because I have depression doesn't mean I can't have. I won't be able to have a child. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. And honestly, like, I don't want to make it sound like we're advocating for perfectly healthy people that need to go through this screening process, like driver's license test or something. I do appreciate too that you mentioned individuals, because I think oftentimes we think couples have babies. Well, no, individuals have babies all the time, and that's to be respected and honored. Certainly an adoption for sure. There's a lot of adoption necessary in the world, and not enough adoptive parents, not enough foster parents, really.
Yeah.
Something I want to highlight that jumped out at me. I think if I was counting accurately mentally, you said at least 4 times something to the effect of the life you want, how you want to feel, what you choose to for yourself, something in that realm. And it sounds like you're really big on empowering people to look at their internal locus of control rather than the external environment that may be pushing them around to react different ways. Where'd that come from? Where'd you learn that?
when I learned, I think as part of my training, obviously, I did learn that I really like person-centered treatment,
Yeah.
um, because that really puts the control into your client's hands. Um, and I like to mix that up. So I'm trained in EMDR and brain spotting. So prior to me being trained in those modalities, I use and I still use this too. I mix like person centered with cognitive behavioral therapy. I like to use like an integrative approach with my clients. And I like that because it forced the person to think about, okay, what is it do I want? I have the right to make choices for myself. I don't have to rely on other people to do things for me. And sometimes people grow up with being forced to make decisions or manipulate, or grow up with a lot of manipulation or being in those kinds of relationships
Mm-hmm.
where they feel like they don't have any control of themselves. They don't have any, I won't say control. They don't really have any power. They felt powerless. So I think person-centered therapy helps to give that power back and helps the client tell themselves, I give myself permission to.
Yeah.
And that's what I really like to do. What do you give yourself permission to do?
Yeah, for sure. And that sometimes is a real eye opener for people who've never actually even entertained that. It's a little bit like working with youth who, 16, 17 years old, and you go, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they're like, nobody's ever asked me that. Like, wow, what kind of crazy dynamic did you grow up in? And it turns out a very crazy dynamic.
Yeah.
And for people listening who like your ears perk up, it's like, why is the therapist using the word crazy? I purposely use that. I'm not a big fan of like being the word police on people. Um, we can still use crazy and have it not mean what traditionally it's meant in, like, all the 50s movies with the insane asylums.
Mm-hmm.
Things can be crazy. They can be out of control. And certainly we're being raised in a chaotic environment, for many, many years is one of those that can be disempowering. And so when you get into the professional setting and, Jessica sits there and goes, hey, so what's the best life you want to lead? And they're like, wow, nobody's ever asked me that. What do you mean? I get a choice? Oh, yeah, it's your life. It'd be very eye
Yeah.
opening.
I like to make therapy feel like it's a choice, because it is. So, like, obviously, it is a choice if somebody decides they want to go to treatment. But in this process, it's like a continual process of giving yourself permission to be. And I really want that. And that is my goal, to facilitate that. So, honestly, a lot of my question, a lot of times, is what do you want to focus on today?
Yeah.
What's been going on with you? What's coming up on your mind? Because I don't want to, I like to be the facilitator or the guide. I'm not the person who's going to be in charge of your thoughts.
Right. And
And
yeah, go ahead.
the end goal of therapy is to not need me anymore.
Yes,
So
amen. I was
to
hoping you'd
equip
say
you with
that.
the skills that you need to be able to move through life without me at some point.
Yes, yes. And if we're constantly mindful of the person's right to choose, then
Hmm.
it removes us from tromping on their autonomy too, by creating a
Absolutely.
dependent relationship. The therapy in perpetuity is not appropriate. It violates a lot of ethics. Um, if you wouldn't mind, I want to respect your time. We got a few minutes left here. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about dealing with communities of people of color, and your experiences with that, being a person of color yourself, and how that affects maybe your walk through the profession as well as your encounters with clients.
Okay. Where exactly would you like me to start with that piece?
I'm not sure exactly. I think it's just a curious topic that, as a white man, and basically what is a field founded by white men from, Eastern Europe, we don't necessarily have the perspective that somebody who's lived the experience has. And I think my curiosity is just, what do you have to share? Is it even a thing? Is it not a thing? And where should the broader psychotherapy community be mindful, and what might the listening audience take away?
Um,
It's a big question. I know it's a big ask.
it is, and I do want to make it clear, I'm not, I can't speak for everyone who belongs to communities of color, or
Appreciate
to Black
that.
communities specifically.
Yeah.
Um, I would encourage a lot of, especially clinicians, to be willing and be open minded to, learning about history that communities of color have